Well, I had a difficult decision to make. There were two options, and I wanted them both. Saying yes to one meant saying no to another. It was mutually exclusive. And once made, this decision would be final. There was no going back. There was no undoing it. Decision time. Which was right? Which is wrong? Which is best? How do you know? Well, let me show you the decision that I was facing. It was this. To add more gas or not to add more gas. That's like OCD nightmare. Decisions. 1 Kings chapter 6, King Solomon was the king of Israel. He made this decision. Verse 1 tells us he began to build the temple of the Lord. The temple that King Solomon built for the Lord was 60 cubits long, 20 wide, and 30 high. Not huge, but it was quite ornate. The passage continues, verse 21, Solomon covered the inside of the temple with pure gold, and he extended gold chains across the front of the inner sanctuary, which was overlaid with gold. So he overlaid the whole interior with gold. This was no Morton building. This was nice. That was chapter 6. Then we get to 1 Kings chapter 7. After 7 years of building this temple for the Lord, Solomon, he then spends the next 13 years building his own palace. Chapter 7, verse 2. He built the palace of the forest of Lebanon, 100 cubits long, 50 cubits, and 30 high, with 4 rows of cedar columns supporting trimmed cedar beams. That's a huge house. And that's not all. 1 Kings goes on to describe a whole lot of building projects. Chapter 9 tells us Solomon, he built terraces to expand the capital of Jerusalem. He built a wall to defend the city of Jerusalem. He built military fortresses in Hazor, Gezer, Megiddo, and continual building projects during his reign. The Bible describes these building projects of Solomon with language like this. 7 verse 2 says, he built. I think that language is a little bit misleading. Saying Solomon built would be like me saying, oh yeah, I'm rebuilding this stage back here. Am I? Well, no. I offered to help the fixes team, but they said no. They didn't want my help. That was a wise decision. But when we read here, Solomon built, understand that doesn't mean that Solomon actually did any of the work. What Solomon did was he initiated these building processes. Who do you think it was during these days that actually did all the work? God tells us, chapter 5, verse 13, King Solomon conscripted laborers from all Israel, 30,000 men. Conscripted, big word. What's it mean? Hired? No. Asked for volunteers? No. Forced? Yeah. That's the word. Conscripted is a polite way of saying, do the work or go to jail. That's what was going on in the land of Israel during the reign of King Solomon. And who do you think it is, with all these glorious building projects, who do you think financed the bill? Well, Solomon, he was the richest guy on the whole planet, but he's not the one who paid for these building projects. Rather, God tells us Solomon imposed heavy taxes on the people. That brings us up to 1 Kings chapter 12. After a 43-year reign, King Solomon, son of David, he died. And his son, Rehoboam, becomes the next king. Well, the people of Israel, they considered this time of leadership transition. They're like, hey, this is a good opportunity for us to renegotiate the power and the policies that are going on within this kingdom. So here's what they had to say to brand new King Rehoboam. Chapter 12, verse 4. They said, your father, that was King Solomon, your father put a heavy yoke on us. But now, lighten the harsh labor and the heavy yoke he put on us, and we will serve you. Decision time for King Rehoboam. What would he do? With decisions. Rehoboam had them, and so do we. What decisions are you facing right now, today? Where to go to college? What vocation to pursue? To date or not to date? To change jobs or to stay where you're at? What do I do with activities? Should my family do this? Should we do that? What should I do with an aging parent? Should I do laundry or should I just buy more underwear? We've got options. Decisions. We all have decisions. Some of them are big decisions. Some of them are smaller daily decisions. Well, what decisions are you facing today, and how do you decide what to do? How do you decide what's right, what's wrong, what's best? How do we know? Well, in 1 Kings chapter 12, here's what's going on. 1 Kings chapter 12, God is giving us the details of how this King Rehoboam made this decision. And I believe that God's got this in the Bible. He put it in here to help people like you and to help people like me discern as we make decisions in our lives. So let's check it out. See what he did, see what God has to say. Verse 5, Rehoboam answered, well, go away. Go away for 3 days and then come back to me. So the people went away. Well, apparently Solomon, Daddy Solomon didn't teach his son how to use finely nuanced words like conscription. Go away. He just told him, go away. We read that. That's kind of harsh language. But do realize this, that process that Rehoboam, instituted, it was wise. Here's what he did. He's faced with a big decision. First thing King Rehoboam does is he paused. He said, I'm not ready to make that decision right now at this moment. He requested time to make this decision. Doing that, taking some time to think and process and analyze and pray about the decisions that we face, that's wise practice. Delaying the response, it prevents us from making knee-jerk reactions based on emotional or partial data or on exaggerated needs. Have you ever made decisions that way? I have. I'll give you an example. One afternoon, Sarah and I, we were driving along and we drove past this. It's the Animal Rescue League. Well, we decided to spontaneously stop and to go in, and we did. They were very hospitable, and they showed us around, and they had a puppy. And it was a cute little puppy. It was furry. It was friendly. It went up to Sarah, and it gave her a little lick on the face. Do you know what we did? Yeah, we got a puppy. That's what we did. Had we thought about training or bathing or shedding or house training? No. Had we puppy-proofed our house? No. Had we researched the breed? No. How do you think this decision played out? Right? Oh, tears. Lots of tears. Because what ended up happening, this cute little puppy ends up being an outdoor, high-energy dog that ransacked our house. And he must have really liked the taste of carpet, because he ate a lot of it. So Sarah and I, we had to uninvite this dog and admit that was a bad, impulsive decision. Have you ever made any like that? The Scientific American magazine, they published findings from a research project on decision making. Here's the conclusion of this study. They said, when participants in the study took time to reflect on a decision, they were more pleased and satisfied with the decisions that were made. That's what God's been saying for thousands of years. That's what he's saying in 1 Kings chapter 12. Taking time, gathering facts, and processing information, it increases the likelihood that a decision will be a good decision. So with the decisions that you're facing today, don't just cave into the impulse of the moment. Pause, reflect, pray, think, and don't spontaneously go to the Animal Rescue League. Those things will help. Well, King Rehoboam, he took some time to make this decision. The passage continues showing us what he did with his time. Verse 6, then King Rehoboam consulted the elders who had served his father Solomon during his lifetime. How would you advise me to answer these people? He asked. He sought counsel. He humbled himself. He recognized, I don't know everything. I don't have all the answers. I'm going to ask some other people, let them weigh in and see what their advice is. That, good call. Because God, he's advocating that we bring wise people into our decision-making processes all throughout the Bible. Check these Proverbs out. Proverbs 15:22. He says, plans fail for lack of counsel, but with many advisors, they succeed. Proverbs 11:14, kind of the same thing. He says, for lack of guidance, a nation falls, but victory is won through many advisors. This must be an important theme in the Bible because we get another one right there in the Proverbs. Proverbs 12:15 says, the way of fools seems right to them, but the wise listen to advice. What God is saying is he's saying bringing other people into our decision-making process who may have a different perspective than we do, that's a wise thing to do. King Rehoboam, he did that. And the passage continues and shows us he actually consulted two groups of people. The first group of people that he consulted, that he asked advice, I got this decision. What do you think I should do? He lays it out for him. First group, well, it was the old guys who had been around for a while. They were the advisors to his dad, to Solomon. Here's what they had to say. Verse 7, they replied, if today you will be a servant to these people and serve them and give them a favorable answer, they will always be your servants. See, these guys, they understood what we talked about a couple weeks ago in the passage in Deuteronomy, lays out what the purpose of a king is. These guys got that. They understood what God was saying and had been teaching. They understood that the role of a king given by God was not to amass a personal fortune. God had entrusted the king with influence and with authority for a purpose, to be the protector and the provider of the people. He gave them power not to abuse and manipulate, but to honor, to serve, and to bless. They got that. Well, the second group of people that King Rehoboam talked to, these were his childhood buddies. These were his friends. He spent a lot of time with these guys, so he wanted to check in with them too. Here was their advice, verse 10. The young men who had grown up with him replied, these people have said to you, your father put a heavy yoke on us, but make our yoke lighter. Now tell them, my finger is thicker than my father's waist. My father laid on you a heavy yoke. I will make it even heavier. My father scourged you with whips. I will scourge you with scorpions. Here's what they were saying to him. They were saying, Rehoboam, you have power. Use it. Enforce your power. Show these guys who's boss. You need to set the tone right now. Well, King Rehoboam, he delayed his decision. He sought counsel. When he sought counsel, he got two very different pieces of advice. I think what God's bringing to our attention through this, he's showing us it's a good idea. It's a good idea to pause, to think, to reflect, to pray. Good idea to seek counsel and to listen to advice. But recognize this, not all advice is good advice. Isn't that true? I mean, the world we live in, there is advice everywhere, right? Social media, podcasts, signs. Everybody has advice. Everybody's got a message. Everyone's trying to tell us things. One of the most important things that you and I need to learn to discern traveling through the world that we live in is this. What's good advice? Is this advice good? Is it godly? Is it wise? Or is it not? Important for us to learn and be able to discern, is this good or bad advice? So let's do this. Let's try it. I'm going to share with you, just practicing, learning, is this good advice or bad advice? I'm going to share a few sayings with you that are out there, that are popular, that are common, that we hear, on a daily basis. And what I want you to do is kind of think through these things and say, well, is that actually good advice or is that bad advice? Kind of honing in this skill of discernment. All right, here's the first one. It's this saying. It says, keep your words soft and sweet, just in case you have to eat them. What do you think? Is that good advice or is that bad advice? Yeah, I agree. I think that's good advice. There's some wisdom in that. Okay, let's look at another one. How about this one? It says, not feel well, get drunk. This good advice or bad advice? Getting drunk, that fixes everything, right? Well, wrong. Doesn't fix a thing, actually makes it worse. That's bad advice. Or how about this? Have you heard this one? When everything is coming your way, check to see if you're in the wrong lane. Good advice or bad advice? I think it's pretty good. If everything's going the wrong way, maybe you're the one that's the issue. There's some wisdom in that. One more. Well, let me share this one. This one's even on the cover of a magazine. It says this, nag him and he'll be at your side longer. Yeah, nagging is charming. No man can resist a nag. Good advice or bad advice? It's bad advice, but you know where it's at? It's on the cover of a magazine. Just because it's on a magazine. Just because it's on the podcast that you like, just because a famous celebrity is saying it or endorsing it, that doesn't make it good advice. We need to discern, is that good, godly advice or is it not? Getting that skill into your life, it's an important one. Well, King Rehoboam, here's where this goes. He didn't do what you just did. He didn't discern. He just took the advice of his drinking buddies who wouldn't recognize wisdom if it ran them over with the truck. Here's what he did, verse 13. The king answered the people harshly. Rejecting the advice given him by the elders, he followed the advice of the young men and said, my father made your yoke heavy, I will make it even heavier. My father scourged you with whips, I will scourge you with scorpions. We make decisions, and then those decisions make us. We live with the consequences of the decisions that we make. Here's what happened in this situation in Israel. Vast, sweeping consequences. Verse 16. When all Israel saw that the king refused to listen to them, they answered the king, what share do we have in David? What part in Jesse's son? To your tents, Israel. Look after your own house, David. So the Israelites went home. That's a very historic passage in the Bible. So here's what happened right there at that moment. 10 out of the 12 tribes of Israel said, no. King Rehoboam, no. We're not in on that. 10 out of the 12 tribes of Israel, they left. this one nation of Israel at that moment, because of King Rehoboam's decision, they left. Sometimes you maybe wonder or get confused in the Old Testament. It's like there's Israel and there's Judah. What's the relationship? Well, it started with one nation, the nation of Israel, right here. Because of the decision of Rehoboam in this chapter, that one nation of Israel became two, Judah and Israel. King Rehoboam's decision changed the course of history. What decisions are you facing today? Right now, I imagine that some of you are facing decisions that will have a major impact on your future. Maybe that's even why you're here. Maybe you came to church thinking and hoping somehow that God would download direction for this decision that you're making. Well, here's the way that typically works for me when making decisions. Typically, God doesn't send me a text message. If we have and develop a relationship with God, if we learn how to recognize His voice, what He can do, sometimes He might, through the Holy Spirit, clearly and directly guide us. I love it when He works that way. But sometimes He doesn't. Sometimes He uses this 1 Kings chapter 12 method. Proverbs 19:20 puts it this way: listen to advice and accept discipline, and at the end you will be counted among the wise. Do you want to be counted among the wise? Man, I do. God says, if you want to be counted among the wise, here's what you need to do. Don't go it alone. Bringing other people into your decision-making process is wise. Sometimes God's wisdom and guidance come to us through other people. King Rehoboam's legacy, it actually adds one more thing than that. Asking advice, bringing people in to the decision-making process, but King Rehoboam's legacy shows us needs to be the right people. Not just any people. He asked his buddies, they didn't have great advice. God's saying, do you have the right people in your life? Wise people who are in tune with God. Look at their lives. Is there fruit in their life? Do you see spiritual maturity? Have they been making decisions that have led down a good path? Look at those things. Those are good indicators. Am I surrounded in my life with people who have been making wise decisions? Some of you have a desire to follow Jesus, and you really deeply want to know God's plan, and that's wonderful, and you want to make wise decisions in your life, but you're not in community with other wise, godly people. That's a problem. We can live as if showing up to a worship service once in a while is what God expects from us, and being in community, well, that's a bonus for if and when we have time. Well, that's not God's design. Being a Christian is being connected to God through Jesus and being connected with God's family. It's having a personal relationship with Jesus and having a personal relationship with the followers of Jesus. Jesus and the followers of Jesus, both. God's design for us is both. If you don't have a community of people that know and love you and know and love God and can help you sort through major decisions in life, you are not experiencing one of God's greatest gifts. I'm glad that you're here today. Everyone is wanted and welcome to join us as we worship God and remember what He's done and celebrate Jesus. But understand this, a worship service, if this is it for you, at some point you will become dissatisfied. A worship service, no matter how great, no matter how powerful it is, it will not meet all of your spiritual needs. God designed things that way on purpose. At the Ridge, we're very intentionally structured to provide the opportunity for community for anyone who desires it. Developing community, it doesn't happen by sitting close to each other for 60 minutes once a week. We've always been clear about this. Developing community takes an additional step. Getting involved in some kind of a group, in some kind of a serving team, in some kind of a ministry or class. There's today nearly 600 people are involved in a group through this church, and they're experiencing some powerful things. These groups, men's groups, women's groups, community groups have been essential to developing relationships and helping people grow closer to Jesus and making good decisions, developing lifelong friendships. We've been doing this since day one. We won't force you. We won't impose this on you, but we sure do invite you. If you're in this situation today and you just realize, I really don't have good godly wisdom, good godly counsel. I'm really not connected. I really don't have community. Whether you're new here or that can be the case. You could be here many years and you realize, I've kind of been disengaged. I'm not at that point anymore. Recognize this. Only you can change that. True? If you're not experiencing community and connection, only you can change that. You're invited. I invite you to do something. I invite you to take a step. We'll show you some ways how at the end of the service. 1 Kings chapter 12, verse 3. The whole assembly of Israel went to Rehoboam and said to him, "Your father put a heavy yoke on us, but now lighten the harsh labor and heavy yoke he has put on us, and we will serve you." This new king, he has a decision to make, a decision that would greatly affect the future. He did a couple things right. Right out of the gates, he delayed the decision, didn't make a knee-jerk emotional response. That was good. And he sought godly counsel. He asked other people for advice. That was good. But his issue, where things went wrong, where the whole nation of Israel ended up creating a schism, here's where that all started. He surrounded himself with unwise friends. He thought that he could hang around them, have a few laughs, and he could remain unaffected. Instead, the influence of those friends, they pulled him down. Their advice caused him to lose 10/12 of the kingdom that his father and grandfather built. Rehoboam, he lost all that in 3 days with one bad decision. Well, let's close with this. I'm going to invite you to read God's wisdom to us from Proverbs 13:20. And let's do that together. Join me. Walk with the wise and become wise, for a companion of fools suffers harm. Walk with the wise and become wise, for a companion of fools suffers harm. Who are you walking with? Who are you listening to? Who's influencing you? Who are you surrounded by? Don't miss out on one of God's greatest gifts, other followers of Jesus.